Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of The Final Mile where we answer all of your questions. Continue to send them our way through YouTube comments, through our email, our website, freight360.net. And make sure while you're over there, check out the Freight Broker Basics course, a course full-length, self-paced, taught by Ben and myself, everything how to start your brokerage and succeed. And please take a moment, check out the sponsors in the description box. All right, our first question comes from a carrier who asks, as a carrier, how can I find consistent loads? So I chose this one because I want to answer it and give freight brokers a perspective here that maybe they don't always, a lot of times brokers think, customer, right? The shipper is the most important thing to me. And that's not the case. Reliable carriers are extremely valuable to you, especially reliable carriers that can do repeat business for you. Because if it's very low touch, light lift, all you got to do is just verify each week that, hey, you still got Joe or Sally available for this pickup and this delivery. Makes your job a whole lot easier than trying to go out there and sling a truck the old fashioned way. So the advice that I would give is the same way that we tell freight brokers to build really good, meaningful relationships with shippers. Carriers, you should be doing the same thing. If you're an owner operator, right, your goal should be not to just take loads off the board every single time you're driving your truck. It should be maybe you've got a consistent lane that you're running for a direct shipper, or maybe you've got consistent lanes that you're running for a good quality freight brokerage that you've got a good relationship with. Brokers are great for carriers in the fact that they cast a massive net for available shipments for you that aren't always going to be just availably posted on load board. So my basic advice would be build some good relationships with brokers. I see it in our Facebook group, Ben. I see a lot of people doing that, and I love it when they're like, hey, I've got 53-foot dry vans available in this city consistently. Any brokers interested, send me a message. What's your take on it?
For sure. I mean, there's two tasks that take up most of your time as a freight broker: calling shippers and talking to carriers, right? The more you can reduce either one, the more time you have to do the other one, right? Hey, if I want more business, every time I can get a carrier to pick up a load on a consistent basis, once a day, once a week, once every other week, I don't care what it is, whatever that repeat is, that's one less book. That's one less truck I got to vet, call, negotiate with, and book for the first part. So selfish motivation, for sure, every broker should be looking for opportunities to get more work for the same trucks you're using. Not only does it provide better service, but it provides less risk, less work for both of you. And it's a win-win for everyone when you can find them. So for sure, that's there, right? The thing I would add is definitely want to do exactly what you outlined. You want to ask brokers, hey, do you have any consistent freight? Is there anything on a weekly basis, right? But also, if I'm on the trucking company side, like I'm going to call lots of shippers directly, right? And I am going to lead in with something very simple. The shippers I would call first would be the places I go to the most often, right? So if I'm a Pittsburgh carrier and I tend to see myself in Chicago on Wednesdays and I'm typically wherever on Thursdays, whatever these places are, you tend to see yourself most often. Those are the places you pick shippers to call because they fit your network the most. And your phone call to them is very simply just telling them the truth. I am in your area on a regular basis every week. I work for these other customers. I think we could find some opportunities to work together if you have them. I'm here regularly, and I think I can offer you a fair rate if you've got some consistent work. If you do that 10 to 15 times a day, in a month to 2 months, you will have some more consistent loads. You will have better relationships. And now you're playing both hands. You got some money that you can come from relationships from brokers, which is great. Spot loads are going to be the most profitable anyway, but they're also the most risky. So when they're there, everybody's happy. When they're gone, everybody starves. So you want some of it, but you also need to eat from the other side of the restaurant, if you will, which is going and getting like fundamental loads that you can also rely on that are likely to stay at the same rate. They're not as great as your huge rips you get in a spot market, but you can rely on them to make sure you know you're not going to starve when the spot loads aren't there, because they will not stay there forever.
For sure. Good discussion. Love to see carriers looking through that lens of trying to have a long-term relationship with a freight brokerage, right? It's good stuff. All right, next question. This one came in through email. I kind of summarized it because it was lengthy, but we're gonna have a good discussion on it. He had asked us, what are your thoughts and perspectives on non-competes and non-solicitation agreements? So we've done like full-length discussions on this, and
Yep.
so here's my take. First of all, depending on the state that you're in, the non-compete portion of it may or may not be something that is typically upheld. And additionally, if a non-compete is so vague and broad, it's going to be really hard to convince a judge to enforce it. Meaning, if it doesn't have a time restriction and a geographical radius on it, or if those are too loose, I've seen them very, very easily challenged and tossed out. For example, if a freight brokerage says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, if you decide to leave here, you cannot go work for any of our competitors in the entire country for 3 years. That's a very long time, and that's a very, very broad scope on the geographical radius. The ones that are very ironclad, assuming you're in a jurisdiction where non-competes are a commonality, you might see something like, you can't go work for a competitor within 50 miles for 6 months or for 12 months. That is reasonable, right? If somebody's moving their family across the country or to a different state, they naturally are going to leave their job if it's not remote, and it doesn't restrict them from going to continue to work in the industry and provide for their family. Non-solicitation, on the other hand, refers to soliciting customers or employees or contractors of that business. So that would be something like, and this could be alongside or just, it could be along with a non-compete, or there might be no non-compete, but just a non-solicit saying, sure, you can go work wherever you want. You just can't take your customers with you. And don't try to poach our employees either. And they'll put a timeline on there, for a year or something like that. My take on them is I don't personally find non-competes to be beneficial for the overall growth within our industry. I think that there's a lot of smart people, and if they're stuck in one organization, they're limited on how they're going to grow professionally and from their different perspectives that they'll gain at different organizations and in different roles. I've seen some that'll basically tell you, like, if you're a freight broker, you can't go work at a carrier. You can't go work for a distributor. You can't work at a dispatching company. Like, it's not even, I've seen where you can't go work for an insurance company that insures the, transportation company. So I think those are silly. But again, whoever has the deepest pockets can fight that stuff the most. Non-solicits, here's my take on that. It's an ethics thing, in my opinion. If you came to my company and I paid you for 3 months to train you on everything and helped you get some accounts or assign you some accounts, don't go steal them on your way out, right? I think that there's an ethical issue there. So if you have a non-solicitation, violating it is, in my opinion, would be wrong. If you're not held to a non-solicitation agreement and you put the work in to get those customers, you're kind of in a really awesome position because then you can write your own destiny. But that's my take on non-competes, non-solicits. They're going to be case by case. They very rarely get in front of a judge. They're usually settled outside of a courtroom. I've probably seen 150 cease and desists or beyond that cases where someone's being told, you're violating this, stop. And the very, very slim minority of them actually make it to a point where they're battling back and forth. Typically, young kid out of college who leaves freight brokering after 12 months, gets a letter from a lawyer and is afraid and says, I'm not going to work in this industry. So they serve their purpose in that aspect. What is your take on it, Ben? I kind of hopped around there, but I'm curious. What are your thoughts? Are they useful? Should they exist?
Mine are similar. I mean, I think non-competes hinder industries. I think it puts too much leverage on the companies. But there are absolutely cases where, like, I can see the other side from the business owners. There's a famous one that Warren Buffett talks about in his biography. It's a furniture company. He buys, like, it's somewhere in like Wisconsin or somewhere up in that area, right? And in his biography, he talks about he buys this company, and the woman who sells it to him, I mean, she's much older. Like, I want to say in her 70s or 80s, right? And she builds this massive furniture company that he buys, right? And he doesn't put a non-compete in. And this woman literally turns around, and I want to say she's like in her late 70s, builds another one, competes with him, and he has to buy the second one, right? So, like, I think there are definitely examples where, like, they're warranted. If I'm buying your business, I don't want you to create the same business 3 weeks later that I'm going to compete with you for, or that I got to buy. But from the employee standpoint, like, I think they're more just the heavy-handed ability for large companies to protect their own interests. Like, some of these companies train thousands of people a year, and I guess from their point of view, they don't want to just train their competition. If they don't hack it in their company, they're just going to go out and compete with them. So I think there's like some point that makes them somewhat like reasonable, but how they're used is absolutely not that. To your point, they're mostly used to just throw weight around and to keep people out of an industry. And to me, that's not ethical. Like, if I have a passion for this industry, just because I worked for your company should not prevent me from working in that industry for more than a year. 12 months is what I've seen they typically kind of hold up to. And I looked up the
Yeah.
states, at least now. They're California for sure, Oklahoma, North Dakota, and Montana. That's why you won't see lots of these large freight brokerages have offices in California for that very reason.
Yeah, there's a thing called a right to work state, and it's not just exclusive to non-competes.
Non-competes, right?
It has to do with like the ability to organize and unionize and all that stuff. But there's verbiage in there that basically, I don't want to try to quote it like a lawyer.
Well, I want
But
to read this. I'll read this for you
go
because
ahead.
there's at the bottom. It's just like, it's important to note that even in these states where non-compete agreements are or aren't enforceable, courts will typically scrutinize them to ensure they're reasonable in terms of duration, time, how long they are, geographic scope that you said, for what region of the country do they sit on, and the legitimate business interests they seek to protect, right? Like, I gave you an example where there are like legitimate business interests. Most of them are just a company's ability to just throw their weight around.
Dude, let me give
There's
you an
no legitimate
example.
business
So
interest.
I was part of I'll just say it, I was part of like a TQL
I
big
remember.
like mega case.
Yeah.
I think it was in maybe late 22. And what it came down to, so like originally TQL's and they had hired outside representation for this big case, but they
Everyone
were
that's ever
basically
worked there
saying,
has gotten a letter from Chris Brown
yeah,
on their way out.
but the attorneys, their argument was that, like, yeah, TQL believes that their training is proprietary.
Yeah.
And then, through discussion, it was very clearly argued against that nothing that they're doing is proprietary or different than what other successful training programs are.
Yep.
It's sales coaching.
Yep.
It's coaching on organization and rapport building. But what it really came down to, and this, like you said, to protect their interest, what they really cared about is, we don't want to train you, have you get this business just to then see you out
Turn
the door
around.
and steal this business and
Yep.
other employees from underneath us. So regardless, if you sign a non-compete with a company like TQL, you signed a non-compete. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove and lawyer fees can get expensive, they're going to focus on, in my opinion, they're going to focus on what is their biggest interest. And it's not you, it's the
The customers
revenue,
and the
the
carriers.
billables. Yeah,
They'll
carriers
fight
too.
both those. They'll fight the carrier relationships too, right? For those, the instances that always bugged me with these larger companies, and I've been involved in a few, right, were like wanting to work for the customer, right?
Yeah.
And again, I guess there's an argument that can be made that if you, from
You can
TQL's
direct where the
point,
freight goes then.
right, their point of view was, hey, we taught you how to cover loads for them. They want to hire you from us. Like, clearly that's our business. So that's against our best interest. Like, I can understand that at least there's an argument to be made there. But in most of these scenarios, like that's not in any way how it was going to play out or how the company trying to hire that broker wanted to proceed, right? That's like one extreme example they use to justify all of these things. And to me, most of them don't hold much water.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not an attorney
I was
or
gonna say the
a
last thing I'm gonna
judge.
say is we're not attorneys, and I recommend
Right.
to use one. I have been sued myself from being part of a non-compete, non-solicit. I have been in a company where we've had employees or agents that were involved in that process, and like I said, I was part of that big suit with TQL. So I've seen these and been around them enough. My recommendation is if you're going to get into freight brokerage and you're young and you're out of college, know what you're signing. And if you don't know what
Yes.
it is you're signing, have somebody take a look at it that's a legal professional,
Well,
because
and here's the reality.
I think there's almost predatory. There's a case to be made, argument to be made that there's like predatory practices by some of these companies that just kind of slide it in there and don't really explain to these kids what they're signing. So
For
do your
sure.
due diligence.
But how much leverage does most of those kids have? If they want the job, if they don't, they want to
None.
take it. It's usually you got to sign it to move forward, right? But we're pointing out there's usually other employment opportunities that don't involve the non-compete, where you can have the non-solicit, still do things ethically, get into the industry, and not have to deal with a headache. Should you not want to keep working for that company, right? Like it's two-way street.
For sure. All right. That's enough on non-compete, non-solicit. Next question. How do I get set up to move USPS loads? That's the United States Postal Service. I'm not going to answer this by telling you exactly how to go through and onboard as a broker or carrier, because there's a lot of restrictions and they're very specific. But I will tell you that everyone that I have seen ever as a freight broker move USPS loads, they didn't do it directly in most cases. What they did was they would find out who, because what USPS will often do is they'll take all of their business, which is a lot of business, and they'll chop it up in contracts to some large companies. And then what you can do is co-broker with those customers to get little bite-sized pieces, kind of the same way that Crowley handles a lot of the military freight, that big contract. So, you can co-broker with them. That's my aspect on it. I will tell you that year-round USPS loads, different than their peak season towards the end of the year. So pretty cool. We talked about Project Freight in the last podcast. Like, it's a pretty cool project style environment to be in if you're getting involved in that 1 month peak season towards the end of the year. Do you have any history with USPS or any work with anyone who has?
Yeah, I know the one agency I work under, business to business logistics, did a lot of business with them, I think last year. I don't know if they still are, but yeah, I was involved in kind of the setup process and things. But for the most part, like I can't recall off the top of my head who it was and how they reached out and like the semantics of which department was which, to be honest.
Yeah, the stuff that I saw, like the peak season, we had a guy at my last company who their group did a lot of it. And it was really cool because it was all, in essence, it was round trip, no empty miles. So like you would line these drivers up, and for 3-4 weeks, I'll just make up 2 locations. They'd go from, let's say, Baltimore to Richmond, and then they would unload in Richmond, and then they load up with stuff going back up towards Baltimore. And you just keep going back and forth, back and forth. So it's great money for the drivers, great money for the brokers. Very efficiently run, so it's good for the shipper to USPS. It's just a lot of work. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of touch, a lot of track and trace to make sure people are where they're supposed to be on time. So, Good question. Next, this came from our Facebook group. What is the best way to get certified as a freight broker? Should I look into an online course or community college? So the word certified, you get licensed through the FMCSA. All right, they are the one. You're given your authority, and there is no requirement to have any sort of training. Like if you get a driver's license, you got to take depending on like New York State, you got to take a 5-hour course. You got to have your learner's permit for 6 months and have driven 50 hours of supervised driving, and then take a road test and pass, and you're given your driver's license. You want to be a freight broker?
5-hour course?
Yeah, you have to take a 5-hour course that teaches
you
you
driver's license.
Yeah, man, New York, dude, it's like the worst state to live in. So basically, like what happened is in high school they offer this 5-hour course, You take you basically you go 2 nights during the week for 2.5 hours each, and they cover like
I
all
took
the
it in
rules of driving.
PA, but mine was like to reduce my insurance. It wasn't like a requirement.
That's a
I
different kind of course. This is a pre-licensing course. I've gone through. I used to have a lead foot and got a couple speeding tickets, too many, and I had to take a course to drop points on my license for my insurance purposes. But you take 5 hours of pre-licensing that teaches you like all the rules of the road and traffic basics and things like that. And then we had to have 6 months of having your permit, 50 hours of documented supervised driving. So like driver's ed would cover a lot of that, and usually your parents would sign off on the rest of it. And then you take a physical driver's test and you get your license. Freight brokerage, pay $300, fill out an application online, and within a month, boom, you get an NC number. So as far as certified, you don't get certified. Now, how do you get the experience you need? So there's options. The community college course route, I didn't know that existed until like 5 years ago. I think it's kind of a scam. Like you're being taught by, first of all, you're paying college rates. Even community college is going to cost more than like for our course, for example, right? And it's being taught by people who don't do the job, right? They maybe they did in the past, or maybe they're just a supply chain professor.
Here's a good point, though, right? Like, I think all of that's true. The other side of that, right, is what Chris Jolly reached out to us. We're doing an episode on next week, right? There are a lot of people out there that freight broker, whatever that means, or are freight brokers that offer courses that also don't know what the hell they're doing and say that if you take that, you'll learn how to do it, right? I think there's like both sides to that argument, right? Like, I wouldn't go down that avenue either. Like, it's super expensive. A college credit at a community college has got to be $600-700,
I've seen
$500-600.
community college brokerage courses for like over $2,000 because there's a 3
I
credit
probably guess
hours.
$2,500, $2,250.
Yeah. Yep. But I'll tell you this, like, an online course, like, so if someone comes to us and like wants to get coached, we usually tell them like, you got to learn this stuff that's in our course, and then we can work with you on a, twice a month, something like, so you have a mentor to walk you through that process of getting started and deal with the challenges that you have as they pop up. I think that's a great way to do it. Another option too is go work for somebody, learn from them, right? I mean, it's a lot easier to go out and buy a course and pay somebody to train you and coach you. But that in conjunction with working under a company is like probably your best case scenario. Even if you like, hey, for a summer, right? Or in your free time, I want to come learn from you and mentor you and help you out for free. Right. So I can learn, because that'll at least give you an idea. Like, do you even like the industry? Are you going to be okay with cold calling and dealing with upset customers and drivers? So yeah, you don't need a community college class. You don't even need a course for that matter. I think ours is great. Obviously, we taught it. We put the curriculum together, and there was a lot of demand for it through a lot of the customers at DAT. But yeah, I mean, same thing like TIA. We coach their new brokers and very structured curriculum. But even that, I think what we add to it is we're not just, speaking doctrine or like lecturing. We tell stories, we ask questions, we get very involved with the students going through it. And we try to help others learn from each other within the class. So I think there's a lot of different ways to learn this stuff. But if you're just in a bubble on your own, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. So you got to, I mean, a coach is great. Working for someone's great. Being in a group setting is great. Those are all great options. Anything else on that?
I'm a huge advocate of college and like education and reading. I mean, I still do that with most of my free time now. I will say the one thing that I learned a lot transitioning between the two, between college and practical. And I had a professor that told me this. I remember, it was just reminding me, he says, guys, Professor Kennedy, and he was an investment banker that then taught finance. And I was like, I want to stay for my MBA. I want to keep working. I want to stay at school as long as possible, basically, so that I can make more money and learn more when I get there, right? And he told me, he's like, full stop, Ben. Everything you've learned from me and everything you're going to learn in school is a world of difference from what you're going to have to do and learn how to do from a practical standpoint. And I didn't really believe it. I trusted him. He was like, one of those kind of relationships. But still, as soon as I got into the workforce, like I have heard that quote or that line, and I can see him saying it to this day because to me, they're very different things. And I looked it up, by the way, like community college courses for something like this. I just threw it into like BART, and it was like, here's a few examples. I don't even know where this community college is, but $37.95 for certified supply chain professional and freight broker agent training. But it includes additional supply chain management content. So there's a bonus for $4,000. You, to your point, you could go and work for a freight brokerage and they'll pay you to work for them for a month or two. Don't sign a non-compete, sign a non-solicit, go make some money and learn from people doing it. Far cheaper than paying to go to school to learn how to do the job, right?
Absolutely. All right, our last question. Is there an age requirement for equipment for owner operators to haul for certain brokers? So, like, does the truck have to be a certain year? It depends on the company. I've seen brokers that say, it's got to be like I've seen some that it's got to be less than 10 years old. The FMCSA doesn't set a rule on that. I mean,
equipment matters too, the type and what you're doing with it.
Sure,
very much so.
Absolutely. But you got to think about like the use of it. Like if you got a truck, no, let's say you've got a trailer that was very lightly used and it's 15 years old. It's oftentimes in better shape than one that's half as old but was ran to the ground and
poorly maintained. Yep.
Yeah. So like that's why, if you're looking at an internal, maybe you're trying to set your internal SOPs as a brokerage and you say, we don't want to use equipment that's over a certain age. Maybe you can have an exception of that based on the number of miles on it or the safety percentile, like the CSA scores for that carrier overall. If they don't have a lot of violations for vehicle maintenance and driver fitness and hours of service violations, they're running a pretty tight ship. And
I've never looked at it ever, to be honest.
I mean, I hadn't until like Highway. We use Highway now, and Highway tells you by VIN number like year, make, and model.
Yep.
So until
I
then,
look at it now because it does.
Yeah.
You're right. Like I look at it now because I can see it. But I mean, just prior to using Highway, I always just look at the out of service percentage because to me, I don't care how old or new something is. I care how reliable it is. And how reliable it is usually reflected in their out of service reports. So it's like, hey, if you keep getting dinged for out of service, you're not maintaining it well. I don't care if it's a 2020 or a 2010, right? You got low out of service percentage, then you're maintaining it well. And that's all I'm concerned with. Can you get my customers' freight from here to there without breaking down? And to Steven's point, maintain the reefer temperature. If it's a reefer, it's a van, just get it there, right? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, he had a note. He requires 2018 reefers or newer to make sure temps can be downloaded. Yeah, I mean, there's technology that's a big thing too. Also, think about like 99 or older. They can use paper logs still. They don't need ELDs. So if you're worried about double brokerage and you want ELD, the ability to have an ELD download from a carrier, they're exempt from that if they're a 19, if they're older than a 2000 model year. So, but good questions. Keep sending them our way. We love to answer them. We appreciate all you guys do as we have crossed the 1 million download mark earlier, or actually last month. So thank you guys all for that. Looking forward to what the rest of the year's got. Ben, any final thoughts?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.